We're looking at Hungary today, that really captivating country right in the heart of Europe, where all that history and culture just seems to come alive.
Absolutely. And we've got this great pile of material you shared, videos, articles, notes, lots to dig into to really get a feel for the place.
Right, and our mission here is pretty clear. Pull out the best bits, the most important nuggets of knowledge, the insights from all this stuff, so you can get up to speed on Hungary, like really quickly.
Yeah, give you the essentials. We'll be looking at its history, quite a story there, then focusing on Budapest, which is just stunning.
And then heading out into the countryside, right?
Yeah.
See what else is out there.
Exactly. Explore the diverse landscapes, maybe find some hidden gems, and, even touch on some surprising Hungarian contributions to the world, some real innovation.
Sounds like a plan. A real adventure, actually. So let's start with the history. Where does this material kick things off?
Well, the real starting point seems to be the arrival of the Magyar tribes. That was back in the late 9th century, settling in the Carpathian Basin. That's really the origin story.
Magyars.
Okay. Yeah.
People who formed the core of the nation. And that didn't take long to become some significant, did it?
No, not at all. The Kingdom of Hungary, founded in 1000 AD under King Stephen I, that was a big deal. It established Hungary as a major player in medieval Europe for centuries.
A real power. And then, skipping ahead a bit, there's that huge period being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right, from 1867 up until World War I. And what's interesting there is how, even as part of this larger empire, it was a time of real cultural flowering and economic growth for Hungary. Budapest especially saw huge development then.
But then the 20th century, things got complicated. Fast.
Oh, absolutely. Dramatic shifts. The sources really stress the territory loss after World War I, a really tough blow. And then after World War II, finding itself a Soviet satellite state, that whole communist era.
Decades of that. But it eventually led to a moment of optimism.
It did. The shift to democracy in 1989 is described as pretty peaceful, actually. And that opened the door to joining the EU in 2004.
So when you look at that whole sweep tribes, kingdom, empire, Soviet-influenced democracy, what's the big picture takeaway?
I think what really comes through is how modern Hungary is shown as this place that, carries its complex history very visibly, but it's also fully engaged in modern Europe. That blend is everywhere.
And nowhere more so than Budapest, right?
Yeah.
The jewel of the Danube, that comes up again and again.
It really does, and deservedly so, it seems. It's always listed as one of Europe's most beautiful capitals.
Wow.
And the river, the Danube, it's not just there, it defines the city, splits it right in two.
Buda and Pest. It feels so different.
Completely. Buda's the hillside, West Bank, giving you those amazing views. It feels more, imperial, historic, centered on the castle district.
Yeah.
Then you cross the river to Pest, and it's flat, sprawling, with these grand boulevards, much more bustling. That's where you find the famous ruin bars and that energetic vibe.
And linking the two, that absolutely iconic bridge.
The chain bridge, yeah, it was such a landmark achievement. The first permanent stone bridge connecting Buda and Pest opened way back in 1849. Apparently, it was the longest suspension bridge in Europe at the time. A huge deal.
Destroyed in the war, though, sadly.
It was, yeah, but rebuilt, and they reopened it exactly on its 100th anniversary, which is quite something. The material even mentions how, lit up at night, the chains look like strands of pearls across the river. Nice image.
It's just one part of why Budapest has that UNESCO World Heritage status, isn't it?
For sure. The Danube banks and the Buda Castle quarter got recognized pretty early on. It highlights how the river and the castle shaped everything. Later, they added Andrassy Avenue and its area, capturing that grand 19th century development in Pest.
And people have been living there forever, basically.
Yeah.
Long before the Magyars even showed up.
Oh, yeah. The sources mention settlements going back to the Stone Age. Celts were there, then the Romans built a fort, Aquincum. The Magyars arrived around 900 AD. But then the Mongol invasion in 1241 apparently wiped the place out.
Say it to rebuild.
Right, and that's when they really fortified Buda Hill, building the castle that became the core of, Buda Castle.
Which is more than just a building, isn't it? It feels like a symbol.
Definitely. Sitting up there, overlooking everything, it's been destroyed and rebuilt so many times. Now it houses the National Library, History Museum, art galleries. It's this constant, powerful presence reminding you of the city's history.
Okay, let's hop over the river to Pest. The scale of some buildings there is just wow.
Isn't it? The Parliament building? I mean, it's just jaw-dropping. Described as one of Europe's most captivating sights. right there on the riverbank. It's enormous, like 271 meters long.
And the architecture is this wild mix.
It really is. You've got a Baroque floor plan, but the outside is pure Gothic grandeur, almost like a cathedral for politics. And then inside, Renaissance ceilings. Plus, get this, there are 90 statues of Hungarian historical figures all over the outside walls. Talk about wearing your history on your sleeve.
Wow. And nearby, another giant, St. Stephen's Basilica.
Yeah, one of the biggest churches in Hungary. Holds over 8,500 people. And the site has this bizarre history. There used to be an 18th century theater known for animal fights.
No way. From animal fights to a basilica.
Apparently so. A rich guy built a temporary church there later, and eventually that led to the basilica we see today. The inside's full of art, but the main attraction, the really famous relic, is the mummified right hand of King St. Stephen.
The holy right hand.
Yeah, it's a huge national treasure, draws hundreds of thousands of visitors.
And then there's Hero Square. That feels very symbolic.
Totally. It's dominated by the Millennium Memorial statues of the 7 Magyar chieftains who led the tribes here, plus other important kings and leaders. It was all built for the big 1,000-year anniversary celebrations in 1896. That tall column with Archangel Gabriel is part of it, too.
The sources called it a summary history lesson.
And that's exactly what it feels like. You stand there, look around, and you basically get a visual crash course in Hungarian history, all its key figures laid out.
Okay, so beyond the monumental history and architecture, Budapest offers ways to just relax and take it all in.
Oh, definitely. The thermal baths are famous for a reason. Széchenyi Bath is one of the biggest in Europe, huge complex, tons of indoor pools, but those 3 massive outdoor pools are iconic, just soaking in that warm, mineral-rich water. It's a classic Budapest thing to do.
And for those postcard views.
Fisherman's Bastion, up on Castle Hill. It looks like something out of a Disney movie, honestly, with its white stone towers and viewing terraces. It's not a real fortress. It was also built for the 1896 celebrations.
Oh.
But the views. You see the Parliament across the river, Buda Castle next door, the bridges, the whole UNESCO-listed riverfront. It's absolutely stunning, packed with people taking photos, naturally.
And there's another viewpoint, a bit more of a climb.
Yeah, the Elizabeth Lookout on Geno's Hill. It's an old stone tower named after Empress Sisi. It involves 134 steps, I think. Apparently, yes. Especially on a clear day, they say you can sometimes see all the way to the Tatra Mountains in Slovakia. Gives you a totally different perspective high above the city.
Wow. You could spend weeks just in Budapest. But the sources are clear. Hungary is way more than just the capital.
Oh, for sure. Once you get out into the countryside, it's a whole different world. And Lake Balaton is usually the first place people think of.
The Hungarian Sea, Central Europe's biggest freshwater lake.
Yeah, that's the one. Huge summer playground. Apparently, it has this real nostalgic feel for Hungarians, especially thinking back to the communist era when travel options were limited. This was their seaside escape. And you still see a lot of German influence there, too.
But it's not just about sunbathing.
No, not at all. The whole area is buzzing, lots of sailing, hiking in the hills around the lake, cycling paths. And the Balaton Uplands National Park has these cool volcanic hills, vineyards everywhere, lovely villages.
Any specific spots around Balaton highlighted in the material?
Tidony definitely stands out. It's a peninsula with this beautiful old abbey looking out over the lake. There's also a quirky legend about an echo there.
An echo.
Yeah, something about shouting from a specific spot and hearing it bounce back multiple times from the abbey wall. Then there's Kesdely at the western end, known for its palace and just being a nice lakeside town. And Siglighet Castle, that sounds incredible. Ruins of a castle perched on a volcanic hill in the Balaton uplands, offering amazing views. It's been restored and seems like a must-visit.
And that thermal lake nearby you mentioned.
Lake Haviz. Just a short hop from Kesdely. It's the largest swimmable thermal lake in the world, apparently. The water stays warm all year round. It's meant to be really good for you, and it's deep enough that you can just sort of float upright. Sounds unique.
Okay, moving beyond Balaton, what other cities or regions caught your eye in the sources?
Well, Eger, up in the north, gets called a Baroque gem. Known for its architecture, its own thermal baths, and especially its red wine, Igri bull's blood.
Bull's blood.
Yeah. But the big story there is Eger Castle and the famous siege of 1552, where a small group of defenders held off a massive Ottoman army. It's a huge point of national pride.
Right. And then down south, Pécs, Sounds different again.
Very different. Pécs was a European capital of culture back in 2010. It's described as having this real multicultural vibe, a borderless city because of its history mixing Roman, Ottoman, and Hungarian influences. You've got Roman ruins, an amazing early Christian necropolis. It's a UNESCO site, but also a really lively art scene, the Solnay Porcelain Factor Quarter. A really interesting mix.
And if you want a quick trip out of Budapest,
Szentendre seems like the go-to. It's this really charming, artsy town right on the Danube, just north of the city. It has a kind of Mediterranean atmosphere, apparently, partly because of its Serbian heritage. Lots of galleries, museums, colorful Baroque houses. Very picturesque.
okay. The sources also mention Győr, Sopron, Szeged. Quick hits on those.
Sure. Győr, in the northwest, is noted for having loads of historic buildings, especially Baroque and neoclassical stuff. Sopron, near Austria, sounds lovely. A magical hidden place with Roman roots, a well-preserved old town and known for wine. Szeged, way down south on the rivers, is interesting because it was almost totally rebuilt after a massive flood in 1879.
Oh,
Yeah, so it has a lot of beautiful Art Nouveau architecture from that rebuilding period. It's also known as the capital of paprika and has this incredibly ornate synagogue.
Seems like every corner has something unique. What about major historical landmarks outside the cities?
Esztergom Basilica is huge, literally and figuratively. It's the main church of Hungary, seat of the primate. It sits dramatically on a hill overlooking the Danube, massive dome visible for miles, a real national symbol. And Visegrád, also on the Danube bend near Budapest, was a royal capital back in the 14th century, famous for a big meeting of kings held there. Lots of history packed into that spot.
Beyond the well-known places, any really unique, maybe surprising spots mentioned? Natural wonders or cultural quirks?
Oh yeah, this is where it gets fun. There are several UNESCO sites that show different sides of Hungary. Pannonhalma Abbey, a Benedictine monastery founded way back in 996, one of the oldest in Europe.
Wow.
Then Hortobágy National Park, that's the famous Hungarian plain, the Puszta. Think wide open spaces, traditional cowboys or sickos, wild horses, cranes. Very different landscape.
Yeah.
And the Agdelet Karst Caves up in the northeast, a huge cave system full of stalactites and stalagmites stretching into Slovakia. Really impressive underground world.
And that village that's supposed to be like a time capsule?
Halakyu, yeah, in the north, another UNESCO site. It's described as a preserved village from the last century where people still live traditionally.
Yeah.
Like stepping back in time, apparently, a living testament.
Amazing. Any other hidden gems?
A few really stand out. Lillefrud has this amazing neo-Renaissance castle Hotel Pelota, built in the 1930s in a beautiful natural setting. Inspired poets, apparently. Then there's a book called The Floating Village.
Right, you mentioned that. Houses on stilts over a lake.
Exactly. Over an artificial lake originally linked to a power plant. It sounds surreal, very peaceful, and a magnet for photographers.
That sounds incredible.
Doesn't it? And also the Megir Hegi Tarn, a lake that formed naturally in an old stone quarry on top of a volcanic hill. Just this beautiful, unexpected body of water where nature reclaimed something man-made. Oh, and Rudabonya Lake near Agtelek. It's the deepest lake in Hungary, and another old mine. But it's also famous because they found fossils of a 10-million-year-old ape there, Rudopithecus hungaricus.
10 million years old. Okay, that's quite a range. Roman ruins, medieval castles, floating villages, ancient ape fossils.
Yeah, the material really paints a picture of incredible diversity across the country. There's so much more than just Budapest, as amazing as the capital is.
And speaking of surprising things, the sources also touched on Hungarian innovation, didn't they? A different kind of contribution.
Yes, just a few interesting examples showing that inventive streak.
The most famous one is probably, well, everyone knows it.
The Rubik's Cube, of course. Invented by Erno Rubik in 1974. That little puzzle took over the world.
Totally. What about in science and tech?
Well, a Hungarian engineer, Alexander Friedrich Just, was key in developing the tungsten filament light bulb, the kind that became commercially successful. A pretty bright idea, you could say.
Okay.
And then you have John von Neumann, Hungarian-born, a massive figure in the history of computing, often called one of the founders of modern computer science. And Charles Simoni, also Hungarian, who was the chief architect behind Microsoft Word and Excel.
Wow. Word and Excel. So from global puzzle crazes to fundamental tech we use every day.
Exactly. It's just a snapshot, but it shows that pattern of ingenuity coming out of Hungary across different fields.
So pulling all this together, why is this deep dive, using all the stuff you shared, valuable for you, the listener?
Well, hopefully it gives you that shortcut, that accelerated understanding we talked about. We've tried to pull out the key themes, the historical sweep, the highlights of Budapest, the sheer variety out in the countryside, from castles to caves to thermal lakes, and even that innovative spark.
It gives you context, right? So if you hear about these places, or maybe you're planning a visit, or just curious, you have a better sense of the layers, the stories behind them.
Exactly. We've covered a lot of ground, from the Magyars arriving, the kingdom's rise, the Austro-Hungarian era, the tough 20th century.
Explored Budapest, the Budapest split, the Chain Bridge, Parliament, Fisherman's Bastion.
And then ventured out to Lake Balaton, checked out castles like Eger and Siglajet, dipped into cities like Pécs and Szentendre, and found those unique spots like Holoku Village, the Floating Bocad, the Agtelek Caves.
It really sounds like Hungary, based on this material, is a place of incredible contrast. Deep history, resilience, stunning nature, and that surprising creativity.
Definitely. And thinking about all that, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. With such a long and often turbulent history, shifting borders, changing empires, different political systems, how does a country like Hungary manage to hold on to such a strong, distinct sense of identity? How does it balance feeling so ancient and yet so modern all at once? Something to think about.